Welcome to the Mitchell Center for Sustainability Solutions and our Sustainability Talks series. My name is David Hart. I'm the director of the Mitchell Center. We're very glad you can join us today, and we hope you're hanging in there during these very challenging times. So I'd now like to introduce today's speaker, Amara Ifeji. Amara is a freshman at Northeastern University, and talk about looking at the challenges we're facing from many different angles. Listen to this, she's pursuing a Bachelor of Science in Politics, Philosophy, and Economics, and that's not the end of it, with a concentration in Environment and Energy Policy, still not quite done, and a minor in Environmental Studies. So boy, do we need people who are looking at these challenges from so many important angles. She's also the Grassroots Development Coordinator at the Maine Environmental Education Association. And in that role, Amara advocates for intersectional climate justice solutions, equitable access to the outdoors, and empowering youth to spark change in their local communities, just as she is doing. For her work in promoting environmental education, she has received numerous awards, most recently, the National Geographic Young Explorer Award, one of only 2 awards made to youth in the world. Some of my Mitchell Center colleagues and I had the privilege of getting to know Amara a bit when we worked with her and other members of the Equity Subcommittee of the Maine Climate Council. And that was just one of the many reasons we knew we wanted to invite her to speak at the Mitchell Center. Please join me. I guess we can't quite do the applause, but I'm going to turn the podium over to Amara, who will be speaking today on citizen science, a means to promote equity and inclusion in STEM. Welcome, Amara.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction, David. And for our participants, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so incredibly honored to be able to speak to you all today. In high school, I actually attended quite a few sustainability talks, and I have some really deep connections with the University of Maine. So I'm just incredibly honored to be able to share with you all a little bit about my work and overall my story. So today I'll be sharing my story, the work that I do, and how my work helps to address the lack of representation in STEM fields, particularly the environmental sector. And before diving in, I'd just like to give a more personal introduction of myself. This is something that we do at my organization, the Maine Environmental Education Association, in spaces where we might not know, all who are on the call. I do not think I've had the pleasure of meeting all who are on the call today, but thank you all so much for joining. And for a more personal introduction of myself, I will be answering the prompt, if you could see into me, what would you see? So if you could see into me, you would see this new flavor of kombucha that I just tried. Very good. You would see that I am a little bit nervous, as I am for most talks that I do. You would see that I am a daughter, shout out to my mom who's on the call. You would see that I am a niece, I am a granddaughter, and I am so passionate about the environment. And I'd like to speak with you all today really about that passion, where it has led me and where I hope it will lead me. And so in doing so, I think the best way to start a story is from the beginning. So I want to start off from when I was a kid. Next slide, please. So here I am with a few of my cousins. I think I was maybe 7 or 8 in this picture. I'm over off on the far right. I'm carrying one of my cousins, and I'm wearing probably the most stylish outfit that I will probably ever own. So my family is originally from Nigeria. And in 1996, my grandparents were so fortunate to earn a diversity visa lottery. And so in 1996, they moved to Maryland, specifically the DC metropolitan area, and they began their new life here in the United States. And then after a couple of years of being here, my grandparents could actually start sponsoring their now adult children to come over. So in 2004, my mom, my dad, I think I was maybe 2 or 3 years old, and my sister, who was about in the oven, we came over to Maryland, and we started our life off in the United States. And so When we moved to Maryland, we lived with my grandparents, as well as my aunts and uncles and their children. So at one point in a standard 3-bedroom home, we had about 14 people living in it. And it definitely made for a hectic home, but I would not trade it for the world. I just so loved being able to connect with my cousins, which I frankly don't even think they're my cousins. I really just do think they're my brothers and sisters, and having that opportunity to be able to grow up with them. And so, of course, I did love being able to connect with my cousins, but there were times that I wish that I would, or could rather, stay by myself and just enjoy being alone, if you will. And so that's really how I fostered a strong connection to place with the environment and the natural world from a young age. It was mainly because the space could offer up the solace that I didn't have the luxury to in the home that I grew up. And growing up was kind of a place where I could call my own. When it came to ways in order to explore my newfound passion, it was actually quite difficult. In school, growing up in Maryland, I didn't have any formal outdoor learning experiences. Most of my experiences engaging with the environment were done in a classroom setting, and those experiences in themselves were very few and far between. So I found from an early age that I was really self-seeking these opportunities to engage with my newfound passion. So although my parents were very busy trying to make the most out of the opportunity that was coming to the United States, they still found time to be able to take my cousins and I to our local park. And there I really just neglected the actual jungle gym and all of the play sets. And I just actually explored the dirt and found different rocks and played with the little critters that I found digging in the soil. I remember my cousins would always want to go to like Chuck E. Cheese and Dave and Buster's. And I was just the person advocating to go back to the park in order to continue the discoveries that I was making there. Which, I mean, my parents, they loved this idea because they did not have to spend money on Chuck E. Cheese and Dave and Buster's. And so in Maryland, we had a little yard, very small, but my grandfather really discouraged me, as well as my cousins and my sibling, from staying out there. And I remember this one time, I was outside alone. I was playing, of course, in the dirt, digging up some rocks. And my grandfather saw me doing so, and he called me over, sat me down on the porch, and he said, "Amarachuku, outside is not safe." Um, he said, "Do you not know that you are a girl? You cannot continue to stay out here." And although I know now that my grandfather was simply trying to keep me safe in the space that we were in, that was really the first moment where I felt as though I truly could not engage in the outdoors because essentially I did not belong. Next slide, please. So, oh, is there a previous slide? Sorry. Actually, next slide. I think one might have been lost, no problem. So in 2011, my family moved to Maine so my mom could pursue her degree in pharmacy. And once again, I found it really hard to connect with the outdoors. I went through elementary, middle, and the first year of high school with never having formal ways to engage with the environment in school besides recess, which I don't really count as being able to connect with the outdoors in a formal way. And I think that my move to Maine actually made it even harder for me to connect with the outdoors. In Maine, we lived in an apartment. And so although in Maryland, I had like a small little yard, we really did not have that when we moved to Maine. And so in high school, that's when I really took charge of exploring my passion and began to self-seek these learning opportunities. And so here pictured on this slide is the first way that I really solidified my passion for the outdoors through citizen science efforts. So in the summer going into my sophomore year of high school, my research mentor, Mr. Kerry James, who I think I also saw on this call, hi, Mr. James, he presented me with the opportunity to attend the Maine Stormwater Management and Research Team Summer Institute. And so at the SMART Institute, simply SMART for short, I really solidified my passion. And I didn't go into it thinking, you know, this is going to be the single experience that I have in my life that really transforms what I want to do in my life. Mr. James presented it as though, you know, here's this cool opportunity. You get to engage with other students from across the United States. You get to stay at Maine for a week. And I said, you know, this all sounds really cool. But when I, you know, attended, I just really fell in love with all that I did and all that I explored. So at the Institute, we did, I think one day, upwards of 12 hours of water quality management in the Penobscot watershed. For many hours, we would collect macroinvertebrates, which are organisms living in the water in order to ensure the health of the stream. We also used sensors, digital sensors to ensure the health of the stream and take the water quality parameters as well. And I just so loved being in the field, engaging, exploring, and being able to connect with the environment in a way that I was not able to do when I was growing up. And so this was just the first of many experiences that I'm so fortunate that I have had that was able to give me the opportunity to connect with the outdoors in a way that I had not done so in the past. Next slide, please. Oh, I think the slides were out of order. Next slide, please. Awesome. So after attending the Stormwater Management and Research Team Institute, or simply SMART for short, I really had this passion within me to make change specifically in the field of water quality. So at this time, the Flint, Michigan water crisis was being highly televised. Similarly, at Bangor High School, a couple drinking water fountains actually shut down due to elevated concentrations of lead in the water. And so knowing this and using the knowledge that I gained at the SMART Institute, I really wanted to create a research project that would help to address this issue of heavy metal contamination, both in my community at Bangor, as well as the larger world. So with the help of Mr. James, my research mentor, over the next 3 years, I did research which was really focused on using fungi, specifically mycorrhizal fungi, which form symbiotic associations with plant roots, and sorghum Sudan grass, a type of plant, to remove heavy metals from water. And so this research, again, was one opportunity I had to connect with the natural world. I spent countless of hours in my basement growing my plants, killing my plants at one point as well, because I guess research is not one straight shot by any means. I did have some oops moments, but from those oops moments, I think I learned so much. And I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to do research. I think it really just allowed me to see the world in a different way. Beyond the, I guess, exploration that I did in my yard, beyond the exploration that I did playing outside, this research really allowed me to look into the environment in a way that I had not been able to do so before in terms of a science context, and address some of the most pressing environmental issues that I was really passionate about addressing. So my research was a huge part of my high school career. And so I was so fortunate that from my research, I was able to present this research at the Maine State Science Fair, where I was awarded in my junior year 3rd place overall, and my senior year second place overall. And then in my junior year, I was also able to attend the International Science and Engineering Fair in Phoenix, Arizona. And there I was able to secure the best of category and first place awards in plant sciences. So this is just, again, the way my passion really led me to opportunities that I don't think I would have ever had, the opportunity to be able to engage in if I did not have mentors and others who were able to connect me with these opportunities from the passion that I had. Next slide, please. So another opportunity that I took advantage of in self-seeking and exploring my passion for the environment was the Maine Environmental Changemakers. So the Maine Environmental Changemakers is a network housed within the Maine Environmental Education Association. And this is a network of, to date, over 350 youth across the state who are passionate, like myself, about the environment, about sparking both social and environmental change in their local communities, and really, actualizing the future that they would like to see when it comes to the environment, environmental sustainability, especially as it relates to social issues. I attended the gathering when I was 16. And so there I had the opportunity to hear from Vic Barrett, who is one of the youth on the Juliana versus the United States government federal case, which is suing the government for knowingly putting youth in harm's way due to environmental exploitation. And Vic is a youth of color who has such an incredible story. And from that story, I was able to really piece connections that I had not been able to before in terms of my experience, my identity, and the barriers that I faced when fostering a connection to place with the environment. So I am a BIPOC individual. I'm a Black immigrant. I'm from Nigeria. And historically, this is something Vic spoke to that just really resonated with me. BIPOC individuals have not had the most positive experiences engaging with the outdoors. And this generational trauma has really prevented BIPOC folks from engaging in the outdoors. Similarly to that note, many BIPOC individuals are in areas where exploring the outdoors is really not an option because of environmental exploitation and being in neighborhoods and communities where stepping outdoors is really threatening one's livelihood. A fact that really highlights this is that Black individuals actually suffer from higher rates of asthma. And this is due to 1 in 2 Black individuals being within 30 miles of an environmentally exploitative site, such as coal mines. And so because of this, not only are Black individuals, BIPOC individuals, do they have higher rates of asthma, but they also are more likely to be hospitalized because of this. So in fostering a connection to place with the outdoors and being in a community where it's safe to do so, it's in that connection that BIPOC individuals are really putting themselves at harm's risk, which should not be the case by any means. Specifically, there's a lot of generational trauma around the outdoors. As a Black person, being caught at night, historically, at night has been, where individuals have had horrible things perpetuated against them, specifically Black individuals, such as lynchings. There are also cities, some of them even in the state of Maine, called sundown towns, where I know myself, I could never go at nights because I would be putting myself at risk. I remember just this past summer, I was going to Lake St. George with a couple of my friends. And I was super excited to visit the state park in Waldo County. But before even getting to the park, what I saw was 6 Confederate flags just outside of people's homes, already making me feel as though I was not welcome in that space. And so these are really the things that are preventing BIPOC folks from engaging with the outdoors, making us feel as though these are not safe spaces to engage in. Similarly, socioeconomic status also plays into a barrier that fosters a connection to place with the outdoors, another thing Vic spoke to. So I know that growing up, being from a lower income household, it was hard to be able to foster these connections to place outside of my home in Bangor. If we wanted to go to Acadia, for instance, that was money for gas, for food spent throughout the day. That was money that was a trade-off of something else that could be purchased. In Maine, there is snow on the ground about 8 months of the year. So a lot of the outdoor exploration that is done is in the winter months. But of course, winter gear is incredibly expensive. And so once again, in deciding whether or not to buy snow boots or snow pants and things of that sort, there's another trade-off that has to be made in terms of is it that we are going to buy these winter gear, or is it that we are going to keep the lights on, or is it that we're going to keep food on the table? So that was another barrier that I faced when it came to engaging in the outdoors. The last thing that Vic did not speak to, but I myself faced, was this misconception that girls or female identifying individuals do not belong in outdoor spaces. And this was really highlighted when I had that conversation with my grandfather on the porch. I don't think that the outdoors is a place for one type of person, because that really does play into the single story of many different sectors, including the environmental sector, about who is meant to engage, who is supposed to engage. But I found that being a female identifying individual, I was told, Amara, you should not be playing outside. Do you not know you're a girl? So that was another barrier that I faced when it came to engaging with the outdoors. So it was really after attending the Meet a Changemakers gathering that my environmental lens shifted dramatically. Before, I was, purely focused on science and exploring, the scientific connections to the environment. But after the gathering, my outlook completely changed, and it was more of a social one. I really wanted to help other students like myself who face barriers in engaging with the outdoors to be able to do so in a way that made them feel included, as though they belonged as well. Next slide, please. So this passion of mine really led me to run a program at Bangor High School the summer going into my senior year. So the Bangor High has a SMART team. And so that is, again, the Stormwater Management and Research team. After attending the Summer Institute, the summer going into my sophomore year, there was a SMART team that was formed. So what we did was we went sampling. We went out probably once a week, all the way from late August to, well, honestly, until when we could no longer handle the cold. But that was well into February because of how dedicated we all were to ensuring that our local watershed was in fact safe and did not have pollutants in it. So the SMART Institute was again ran the following year, but the year after that, due to National Science Funding Foundation running out, the Institute would no longer be the experience that I had when I was a sophomore. And I really saw this as a huge disservice to so many students. I know that the Institute and attending the Institute was probably the single most cherished experience I have in engaging with the outdoors, because not only did it solidify my passion for the outdoors, but it also really it gave me an opportunity that I know that I would not have had if this opportunity were not in place. So because of that, I knew that I still wanted to have a formal institute, a smaller one, albeit for Bangor High School students to be able to explore the way that I did when I was a sophomore. So with the new connection that I had to Olivia Grissett, the environmental, or rather to be executive director of the Maine Environmental Education Association, she really, another wonderful, tremendous mentor, provided me with the resources that I needed to actualize my vision. So it was September. We wrote a grant for the Onion Foundation, and we were able to secure $5,000 in funding to hold a smaller institute at Bangor High School. And so this opportunity was open not only to students in the Bangor High School STEM program, but it was also open to students who might have not had the most pleasant experiences when engaging in science and STEM. I know for me, it is hard to sit in a classroom and learn about these environmental topics, but there's something so different about being able to connect with the natural world and learn about the natural world hands-on. And so we presented this opportunity to alternative education students, those students who are in summer school, predominantly to BIPOC students, to female identifying students, really all students who had might have had troubles connecting with outdoor spaces because of their identity or maybe the way that they learned. And so it took about 3 months or so to organize, took a lot of work to organize, but at the end, it really is I would say it's the single most like gratifying experience that I've ever had in my life, to be able to see students like myself who have had barriers accessing the outdoors, engage in the outdoors, learn, and really change their perspective about STEM. At the beginning of the Institute, the students were telling me that, after the science course that they were taking, they would never ever explore science again. But at the end of 1 week of exploring, these same students were telling me, I just signed up for my chemistry class. I just signed up for my biology class. I'm so excited to continue on in SMART through the fall for the rest of the year. And this just made my heart so full. It just made my heart so happy that other students like myself were able to connect with the outdoors in this way, and how this single experience transformed the way that they looked at STEM. So these students all went on to continue on in the SMART team, again, sampling each week before and after storm events, conducting independent research around water quality, which they all presented at the Maine Science Fair. And many of them actually were awarded for their research at the Maine State Science Fair as well. So my passion for the environment was solidified with this experience, but it was also really rooted in equity now. And it was from this experience that I knew that I really wanted to continue to address these inequities, these barriers that individuals like myself, especially youth, face when connecting with the outdoors. And so I really wanted to make sure that all those who face marginalization in outdoor spaces have the learning opportunities and the opportunities to be able to connect with the outdoors, experiences that they might have not had in the past. Next slide, please. So this really ties in next to my work at the Maine Environmental Education Association. So it was my senior year that I really realized that, this is where I want to be. I want to be in environmental education, specifically addressing the barriers that youth like myself face in engaging with the outdoors. And so in April of my senior year, so April 2020, the opportunity presented itself to apply to be a Maine Environmental Changemakers Fellow. And so I was awarded this fellowship, and now I am a staff member at MIA. I serve as the Grassroots Development Coordinator. And I'm so grateful to work at MIA. And I really do say this to myself and all those I work with every day, because I'm able to address these inequities. I'm able to continue on exploring my passion for the environment. And this opportunity, I'm really able to make change and be able to realize a vision that I have for the world, and that is to diversify the environmental sector. So in doing so, a couple of the projects that I've worked on in the almost year of working with MIA we recently launched a mini grant for educators, public school educators, specifically prioritizing educators who work at schools that have pretty high free or reduced lunch rates. And so in this mini grant, although the application was only open for about 2 weeks, we had over 100 applicants. And we were able to give funding to 1/7 of all public schools in the state of Maine for educators to be able to realize their vision of outdoor learning in their classrooms and connect their students to the natural world. And by popular demand, we actually secured funding to be able to do a spring mini grant. And so the application is open. If you're a K through 12 public school educator, do check out the Maine Environmental Education Association website for more information if you're interested in applying for this grant. We also, as part of me and the work that I do, we collaborate with the Nature-Based Education Consortium, whose logo is pictured on the right, and I'll speak to shortly. And we also collaborate with the Maine Math and Science Alliance on an initiative called Teach Me Outside. And we just launched a directory, or rather we are in the midst of launching it. It's so close to being done. And this directory is really for educators to be able to, have the resources that they need to implement outdoor learning in their classrooms. The Maine Environmental Education Association also has an annual conference. And so in some of the work that we are doing around the conference is not just talking about, formal environmental education, but really outdoor learning as a means, especially in the midst of the pandemic, when capacities might be low in classrooms. Getting youth outside really is not only a way to ensure that we are all safe in these very challenging times, but also ensure that youth reap the benefits of outdoor learning, which include, health benefits, just being able to retain information better, and things of that sort. As I mentioned earlier, MIA is also houses the Changemakers Network. So through my role as Grassroots Development Coordinator, I serve the youth, the 350 plus youth in the Changemakers Network, really connecting them with opportunities to engage in the outdoors, and providing them with the skills and resources and trainings that they need to be environmental champions, not only in their local communities, but really in our world today. Moving over to the Nature-Based Education Consortium, the Maine Environmental Education Association is a part of this consortium, and this consortium is really rooted in providing equitable learning, outdoor learning opportunities to all Maine youth. And so at NEBEC for short, I serve on the Municipal Advocacy Task Force, which again is really rooted in making sure that educators specifically have the resources and training opportunities that they need to implement outdoor learning in their classrooms. I also am the co-chair of the Nature-Based Education Consortium Communications Task Force, And this task force is really focused on in 2021 in highlighting the stories of BIPOC individuals when engaging in outdoor spaces. As I mentioned earlier, historically, BIPOC individuals do not have the best or most positive experiences engaging with the outdoors or exploring the environment. And so the work of this task force is really going to be focused on highlighting these stories. Of course, highlighting the good ones as well, but ensuring that these stories are highlighted because there is a need. There is a need to address the inequities behind engaging in the outdoors in the environmental sector. And so highlighting these stories will really allow for whether it might be national parks or state parks or land trusts, those who engage folks in outdoor spaces to be able to address inequities and ensure that BIPOC individuals feel more comfortable engaging in outdoor spaces. At the Nature-Based Education Consortium, we also do some policy level work. So we are working on some legislation, Every Maine Youth Outdoors, which is actually being sponsored by the Speaker of the House, Ryan Fecto. Lastly, I also serve on the Climate Education Task Force. And this is really rooted in making sure that all K-12 students in the state of Maine have climate education in order to ensure that they know what is going on in our natural world around environmental exploitation, and they have the knowledge to take action to address these issues. Next slide, please. So to conclude my talk today, I would like to speak to, this question of what exactly can be done to promote equity and inclusion in the environmental sector. And so from my experience as both a BIPOC individual and as someone who worked in environmental education, these are some of the things that I see in order to ensure that there is representation in the environmental sector. These are some of the things that need to be addressed. So the first thing that I have is ensuring that BIPOC folks feel safe and welcome in the outdoors when fostering a connection to place in the environment. So again, I mentioned earlier that historically, BIPOC individuals have had some pretty negative experiences engaging in the outdoors. So some ways to kind of address these inequities is first, highlighting stories. I think stories are such a powerful tool for social change and social transformation. So not just highlighting the good stories of, I went to a state park and this is my experience as a BIPOC individual and this is how I felt in a positive way. Also those negative stories, as I said, in order to address these experiences that BIPOC folks have. Similarly, I would say that it's also important that in these outdoor spaces, all individuals present are able to engage fully. It is hard if I am a person who might not be, someone who speaks English, for example, and I am going on a nature walk, but I cannot read any of the signs, I cannot read any of the maps. That's why it's really important that when we have these maps and signs and things and guides in particular, that we are able to offer these resources, not just in English, but also in other languages. The state of Maine has really big, both Franco-American communities as well as Somali communities. So I think when it comes to, Acadia National Park or state parks, that we have resources that are able to serve the needs of these individuals and make sure they can fully engage in these spaces. The next thing that I have is create more equitable opportunities to formally engage in the environmental sector. So by this, I really mean that when there is a youth who might have faced barriers to access, but somehow found a way to explore their passion for the outdoors, maybe in a more or a less formal way. If they would like to explore those passions in a more formal setting, sometimes it can be very difficult. I'll give an example of this is that in high school, I, had the opportunity in the summer to do my research and do an unpaid internship, or I had the opportunity when I could work to work and make money in, preparing for college. And that was a really hard trade-off for me in particular. It made it so that I could not really entertain the idea of an unpaid internship. But for other individuals, that trade-off is even harder. There are youth who would like to explore their passions for the outdoors who cannot do so because, they have to take care of their siblings or they have to make the trade-off of putting food on the table. So in terms of creating more equitable opportunities to formally engage, by that, I really mean the erasure of the unpaid internship. It is so important that youth in particular do not have to make that trade-off. One shouldn't have to decide whether or not they would like to explore their passion or put food on the table. Instead, they should have the opportunity to be able to do both. And so paying youth for their time, paying BIPOC individuals for their time, really paying anyone for their time, and making sure that they do not have to make these hard decisions is another way to rewrite the single story that the environmental sector has around who is able to engage. Because historically, only those who have, the resources, the income to be able to accept an unpaid opportunity are the ones who are able to engage. So it really limits those who are able to have a seat at the table when it comes to addressing these environmental issues. Lastly, my third note is to begin to address the inequities rooted in environmental exploitation and the disproportionate impacts on BIPOC, lower income, and other marginalized communities. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, BIPOC individuals specifically have higher rates of asthma due to being in close proximity to environmentally exploitative sites. And so it's really, really important that before BIPOC individuals can even get into the outdoors, they need to be able to feel comfortable in their own communities engaging in the outdoors. But they are not going to be able to do so if going outside puts a threat on their livelihood. So it's so important that we continue to address these inequities. It's actually the way that I am connected to David is that I serve on the Maine Climate Council Equity Subcommittee. And so this equity subcommittee is really ensuring that we have clear equity goals when it comes to the technical aspects of the climate crisis so that those who are already disproportionately impacted by the climate crisis, by environmental exploitation, do not face any further harm from any legislation that is passed. And so all in all, it is so important that there is diversity in STEM, in the environmental sector, in really all sectors. It's especially important to get youth outside, specifically BIPOC individuals outside, because not only does engaging in outdoor settings have so many benefits to one's health, it also has the ability to address the generational trauma that I was speaking to that BIPOC individuals have in connecting to outdoor spaces. Similarly, fostering a connection to place with the environment is the first step to becoming an environmental advocate. And ensuring the youth of today all grow up with a passion to protect our natural world and contribute the diverse perspectives needed to address the most pressing environmental issues our society faces today. Next slide, please. With that, that concludes my presentation. Thank you all so much for joining today. I guess I will pass it off to Linda if there are any questions that you all might have. And I also have my contact information on the screen if you would like to learn more about my work. Thank you all so much.
Everyone, this is Linda. Can we give Amara a thumbs up? And she can't see us or hear us, but she can hopefully know that this was really great. And Amara, in the chat, more and more and more responses are showing up saying how much people really valued what you had to say. If you could tell us one or two things that you think we would do tonight, going home, talking to our families, talking to our children, using the computer with friends, what could we do to share your message? What should we start doing?
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a wonderful question. So in terms of what you all can do to share this message, share this story, I would really say the first step is really educating oneself. Although I mentioned a little bit in my presentation, you know, the barriers to access that individuals face when it comes to connecting with the outdoors and some of the repercussions the climate crisis has on specific marginalized communities, I would say, you know, a quick Google search to further educate yourself is the first step. Before one can do, one must learn. So that learning is really something that I would say is the first step to do in terms of addressing these issues.
Thank you. That's just great. You talked about so much. You talked about experiences. You talked about opportunities. You talked about mentors. You talked about research. You talked about science fairs and about learning. And you talked about all of those in a way that helped us all think about them in new kind of ways, in helpful kinds of ways. One of the questions people said, boy, you're doing all these different things. Can you help us understand how does one balance these different roles? How should we be thinking about that? And what have you learned about that?
That is a great question. I think I'm still trying to figure out the answers to that question. As David mentioned, I'm a full-time college student. I also work like half to 3/4 time at NIA and have some other commitments. So I am very much so still like trying to figure out, you know, how to play this juggling act. But I would really say that when it comes to an opportunity that I know that I would like to explore, and I know I have the capacity to explore, I really just say yes to everything. Every single, you know, opportunity that presents itself is a way that I could further my knowledge and, you know, just become better versed in this environmental sector that I'm truly so passionate about. So I would say that, you know, every opportunity to learn, take it. And that is, of course, if you have the capacity. If you don't, self-seek those opportunities and learn those yourself.
Thank you. And one of the great points you made is kind of linked to having time and things and linked to equity and the lack of equity. And you talked about unpaid internships in a really effective way in terms of how we all need to think about how one might not have recognized the extent to which that's an equity issue, but it very much is. Are there things that you've read or watched that would help people learn even more about that? You mentioned Flint, Michigan, for example, and learning about Flint in terms of inequities. And so thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that I kind of spoke to this a little in my presentation, but I think it's really important that one flips their lens when it comes to, you know, the environmental sector. The environmental sector is extremely intersectional. It has many issues of inequity rooted within it. So it is important that we are educating ourselves about it, that we don't just look at the science, but we also look at the social impacts that these inequities have on communities. I think that the environmental magazine, Grist, is a wonderful magazine that I read actually every morning. And it is extremely intersectional in that it does not just talk about the science, but also how that science is disproportionately impacting certain individuals. I'd also say that the the, what is it? ACE, which is, I can't remember what ACE is, but it's very big, ACE. And Barrett, who I spoke a little bit about, they actually work at ACE, and they have some really incredible intersectional climate justice, education tools. And I really recommend that you all check out those resources.
That's great. That's really great. You also talked in a number of different points, brought in how important citizen science has been for you as an opportunity to learn. Are there resources or things that you think about? And before you respond, you mentioned Flint. And at our last citizen science conference that was, I can't remember now. I think it was in North Carolina we were at. And the keynotes were a teacher and a classroom from talking about what had gone on in Flint and how it had affected them and how they changed some of the things that they did. It was amazing, but I digress. So what do you think in terms of what we should look for to better understand citizen science?
I would say engage.
Okay.
It's really easy to engage in citizen science efforts. This might look like a citywide cleanup of any litter that is found in the city. This might look like similar to what I did at my high school, water quality management, going out to test the water a couple times a week in order to ensure its health and make sure that the water is healthy in itself, and that the community engaging with the water is not going to pose harm on the community. There's several ways to engage in citizen science efforts, and I think a way to really better understand them is to really just engage in them yourself and make sure that you participate in these initiatives.
That's great. And people are also adding comments in the chat of things that they know about that would make it possible. And as we're talking about young people, and you talked in great ways about young people, one person who's was listening to you today, who was a part of the audience, said that her daughter was watching with her. Her daughter was learning with her. And so you had so many great things to say about girls belong in outdoor spaces. And do you know children's books, for example, or middle school books, or of things that parents and teachers and others could do to really get the word out?
Yeah, that is a really great question. And that makes my heart so full that your daughter is watching. I would say that in terms of different resources that educators and parents can use to ensure that, their female identifying students and daughters feel as though they belong in the outdoors. I would say that really just engaging, take your child for a walk, have them spot out different things that they see, have them intentionally listen to, that those are the birds and, and things like that. I say it's really just the small things of, yes, this connection can be fostered in a formal kind of classroom setting. I found that it really is better fostered through just engaging in even the most little ways. This does not have to look at, we went to a sleepaway camp and we did all of this outdoor exploration and things of that sort. This can really be as simple as going to the park and
Wonderful.
And noting those things. Awesome.
That's just so interesting. One of the people writing in chat said that he especially appreciated the way you talked about that we really need to be confronting negative stories, not just telling each other positive, but telling each other negative stories and learning from that and thinking about what that means and how we can all, by coming together, do things and make a difference. And do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that it's so important to share all stories. All stories are so important. Um, when I was learning about these issues, if I had been learning about them through a science context, I don't think I would really fully understand. And I don't think I did fully understand because I had both perspectives and I didn't really relate to the stories and how the environmental sector is rooted with these inequities until I heard a story, that being Vic Barrett's. And so it's so important to tell these negative stories because what comes out of that is action. What comes out of that is change. So I totally agree. Negative stories, all stories are so worth sharing.
It just, there's so much that you helped us see that's going on in Maine, and there's so much more that we can do. And I hope that like 6 months from now or a year from now, when we talk to you, we each have a story to say. I learned 5 things from Amara, and I went home and I went to my church or synagogue, or I went to the playground, and I put in practice some of the things. It didn't all go well, didn't all go exactly as I hoped, but I also followed her suggestion that we need to also pay attention to the negative experiences and learn from them and do things. There are so many additional questions that people had about being outside, and there are points in the chat that you'll be able to see that people said, I want, will you come talk to us? Or we'd love to have you work with the Penobscot Nation. Or so you're already busy, but there's a real chance that you're going to be even busier because you have additional learners in Maine who want to learn with you and from you. And we're just so happy to have had this chance today to learn from you and to now turn to all our loved ones, even if it's a cat, as I've said before, or a dog, and say, guess what I learned from Amara today? So David, do you have any final thoughts? And everyone, oh, thank you for coming. Yeah, David?
Yeah, so Amara, thank you so much. I knew that stories mattered to you from some of the conversations before today, but you're a great storyteller yourself. And there is so much we need to learn together. There's some complicated challenges in the world that you've talked about today. It's going to take a lot of work together to get there. And the idea that you are one of a whole group of young people who are better equipped and bring so many different ways of thinking and knowing and working together is truly inspirational. Thanks, Amara, and thanks, everybody.
And everybody's been saying thanks for the fantastic talk.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah.